Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about starting a company. So let's get into it. So the question in question was a little bit of a story. Hi Frederick, this is an amazing video. It was posted on one of my videos. This is an amazing video and answers a lot of questions I've been asking myself. Thank you for making it. If I may, I'd like to ask a question myself. Hopefully that you have time to address it. I have been working as a software engineer for almost over a year at a large company. I graduated in computer engineering last year, but also worked as a research assistant for my professor working on robotics. But I find myself unsatisfied with my career prospects. I wish to start my own company, but I feel that I lack the skill set to do so successfully. I'm considering getting a job as a product manager or executive assistant at a tech startup in order to learn more about running one. I have the soft skills necessary to make the transition. Do you think this is a good idea? What would you advise me? I want to end up a co-founder of a successful firm. Well, my tip to you would be to understand basically what is necessary at the early stages in this life cycle of a company, and then understand. I could try to do the thing that avoid doing the thing that quite a lot of people might do, which is to think about. This is the greatest piece of advice I've ever gotten at the very least. Don't think about what type of person you need to be to run a gigantic super company. Think about the sort of person you're gonna have to be to run a small company. The up and comers. These are the people that you want to talk to. The reason being because when you get to these gigantic corporations, like you were talking about being an assistant or a product manager or so forth, what you have to understand is that usually the people who do that sort of work, they are working at a level where the company has grown to a point where inefficiency and a lot of issues and so forth are part of the daily job, but they've also stabilized the company to a point where they can afford, where it's almost a necessary evil that this happens. But these sorts of people are very, very rare in the smaller companies. The reason being because at a smaller scale, some of the roles that you find in the larger organizations, they are not really necessary, or they're luxuries I'm not even going to call them luxuries. Sometimes you can call them luxuries, but they are roles that are not necessary at that scale. They might become necessary in the future when the company grows or when you get a more complicated domain to deal with, but in the start of things, they may not be. And so boiling down your or trying to sort of get at the heart and core of these roles that usually are the most important when you start a company within IT, that's the thing that you should do. So the first thing to ask yourself is, what type of role do you want within this future company that you're going to start? So I can give you a few examples. Usually, this is a very simplified version of it, but usually there are two types of startups or new IT companies. You're either some form of a startup, a product company basically. That's what your main focus is. You have some idea, some product that you are developing long term. Or you are a consultancy or an agency or something like that. You take on smaller projects, or you basically rent out your skills, and you can rehash this as many times you want, but you're basically on a product by product basis type of thing. You don't have one big digital system or a few digital systems in your portfolio. You're usually dealing with projects towards other customers and so forth. And so when you in the early days, one thing is for certain: the requirements that are usually take startups for the first thing. The first and most important thing in the startup world is you're either going to need people who can ship code, or you're going to need people who can find customers and network with investors and all of this stuff. Basically, get connections to the people who can provide the revenue necessary to continue shipping code. That's the cycle. the code. You can always think of the code or like the value that your product is making. That's your the resource that you are selling. That's the thing that you are shipping to get money, but you also need people who pay for it. So that's the cycle. So these are very general terms, but either you're shipping code or you're finding people who will pay you something for that code. That's practically the only two. Like, these are the two archetypes of person you want to focus as much as humanly possible on in the early days of a startup. When things get to the scale-up stage, it changes a little bit, but fundamentally these are the two main things if you're going to be a co-founder. Like, when you're starting your first company, these are the things that you should be focusing on. Consultancies, very similar sort of thing. You're usually either a person who's finding talents, finding people who want to sign up with your consultancy, or you are an earner. In other words, you are like in this case, if you are a coder or a product manager or something like that, you're basically a representative of your own consultancy. It's very common that a consultancy starts with a few developers, or one developer or something like that. Yes, you sort of just decide that you're going to be a new consultancy. You find some customers, you go and get your brand out through like it's almost word through mouth, right? You basically go out and earn money as a consultant on behalf of your consultancy, and then in the off hours you're trying to grow the consultancy. That way you get connections, because usually, if especially for the larger corporations, if they need one consultant, I promise you they need more than just the one. And that's a way for you to get in, because if you work for them, you can understand the need and you can provide, hopefully you can go out and recruit people from your consultancy on their, so that they will actually buy more people from you, and then you can grow your business that way. But usually that's the second one, or third one, as you probably guess, get customers. These are usually the sorts of archetypes that you're dealing with. And so if your ambition is to start one of these sorts of companies, your first thing should be to align your career strategy to fit into one of these things, and then of course learn the basics of running a business. The reason I argue this is very simple, because these roles, although they are very wide, they are always going to be the roles that every single IT company start out with. Because fundamentally either you're bringing in customers or you are shipping something, like you are getting the resource. These are the two main factors. So a product manager, for example, that's probably, if you're going to run a startup, that's basically a pointless role. I'm not saying it's completely pointless. I'm saying that you would be much better served by a senior software developer than a product manager on average in a startup. Someone's going to have to fill the product manager role. Someone's going to have to be a stakeholder. But the question is that going to be the most value for your company? And then you have to come to that other insight, which is that you're a co-founder. So you need a complementary skill set within the company as well. So if you're not the coder, who are you? Are you the sales rep, or like the person who's going to network with all the people, go to all the startup events and like incubators and stuff like that and present the idea? Or are you, who are you? What value do you bring? And that's the key element that I'm trying to get you to understand. You have to understand the basics of what makes an IT company profitable. When you understand that and how to effectively be one of the people who make that happen, that's the thing that you should focus on. And then try to because being as a product manager or an executive assistant or something like that, even if you're doing it in a startup, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to learn these sorts of skills. Because the reality is that it's a very different role from the thing that you're usually looking to get when you're starting things up. Usually these sorts of roles are when you have gotten a little bit further, and sure, you can get a leg up and sort of get some insights if you work in a tech startup as a product manager or something like that, and that's fine. But you could have done that as a coder as well, because the coder is fundamentally also, the programmer is also a necessary part of setting these sorts of things up, because you need that technical experience in order to make a lot of the decisions. The business mindset is the key element. So what I want you to take away from this is that my suggestion to you is that if you're looking to run your own company, you want to learn the things try to ask yourself, what type of role would I like to have within a new company, and try to align those career choices that you are making in order to train yourself into being effective at something towards either being the person who's helping out with the shipping of code, like the thing that you're actually producing the thing, or you're the person who's getting the customers. This is or investors or networking, etc., to growing your brand or your company, basically. These are the main factors, and a product manager does none of this. A product manager is someone that you get because you need someone to facilitate and organize an already existing team or an already existing product, or if you could also argue that that's a person who's going to grow the idea, or you're going to get, that's going to be the person who's going to invent the product itself. And maybe that, if that's you, that's great. But usually in the smaller startups, guys, the product manager is not someone you introduce in the early days. It's usually someone who comes much later, when the company has gained some traction and you have more projects or more work than any one of the founders can basically deal with. That's when you start scaling things up. So my suggestion is try to focus on those early day skills, because those are the skills that you will get you from point zero to the first step, and then you can grow as you go along as well. Because a lot of the most successful, if you take a look at the really big companies, like the really successful startups and so forth, they don't you don't start running something like Google by knowing absolutely nothing about IT. Usually you start out in the early days as either a programmer or like a networking, a sales rep, a branding person, business insights, something like that. You're basically doing something practical within the company, and then you take on more and more high-level management positions as you go along. That's usually, at the very least, how it works out. And I suggest that you follow the same model. That way you're going to be fairly certain that when you do want to start your company, you will have the necessary skills to get it somewhere. Because the worst thing you can do is to take on work, then responsibilities, and sort of learn just to basically work in an already established big company. That's not that's not going to be so effective if you want to start something yourself from scratch. That's when those core roles are more important. Have a great day.